And one. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Jared Harris. Welcome to today's DevOps Institute webinar titled DevOps Institute SKILup Webinars CICD. I'm joined here with Nick Durkin from Harness, Deepti Chauhan from Keysight, Eric Maxwell from Everbridge, and Jane Grohl from DevOps Institute. Before we get started, I'd like to give you some housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded, and you will be able to view this again later in time. We'll send you an email with a follow-up on how to do so. And any questions that you'd like to ask us for today's program, please ask them in the question box on the right side of your screen. Questions will be answered at the end of the program, and any questions not answered within today's program, we can answer those via email post-webinar if you'd like. Lastly, we would like you to stick around for as long as possible. We will be giving out Amazon gift cards at the end of the program, and we'll announce those winners at the end. And at this time, it's my pleasure to turn the program over to you, Jane.
Thanks, Jared. Hi, everyone. I'm Jane Grohl. I'm CEO of the DevOps Institute. I'm so excited to be here for a SKILup webinar, particularly on the important topic of CICD, and joined with this really esteemed panel. You know, most of us think that, you know, organizations have really tackled and won the CICD battle, and I think that there are organizations at various stages in the CICD or DevOps journey. And so I'm hoping from today's panel that we can really get some practical ideas, whether you're at the beginning of your journey, you're midway at the journey. There's no end, right? This is a journey that doesn't have a finish line, but maybe you're more mature. So I'm hoping that, you know, the diversity of our experience, the different perspectives that we have, will bring you some practical advice. I'd like our panel to introduce themselves first. So why don't we start with Deepti? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about Keysight Technologies.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deepti Chauhan, and I am located in Atlanta as Keysight Atlanta Software Design Center Site General Manager. And Keysight is majorly into test and measurement software and instruments. We have a lot going on 5G, automotive vehicles, and really focusing on not just the instruments, but also on the software side. My team and I have been really focusing on is how do we provide a platform, a DevOps platform, along with other platform elements to our Keysight team so that they can really build faster and deploy it faster to our customers. And there is always, everybody thinks that if either you can go fast or you can go with quality. But I think that's going to be a very interesting topic, which if it comes today, I would love to kind of challenge that out today. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you. Eric, why don't you introduce yourself and X Matters, please?
Yep. So Eric Maxwell, I'm a solutions architect, and it's now Everbridge. So X Matters was acquired by Everbridge earlier this year, so just everyone aware of that. I've been with X Matters for at Everbridge a couple of years now. X Matters is what we call service reliability platform. We integrate with many different tools, but we're here to provide on-call management, automation across, not talking about CICD, but we're not a CICD tool. We integrate with CICD tools. And so I say we automate across kind of your operational processes that are across your, that spectrum of development all the way into production. Of course, we help with things like incident issue management as well.
Awesome. Thank you. And Nick, why don't you introduce yourself and Harness, please?
Sure. My name's Nick Durkin. I'm a field CTO here at Harness. I was employee number 9. And ultimately, when we talk about Harness, we talk about an intelligent software delivery platform. And the first of its kind, really leveraging AI and ML to take care of the worst part of everyone's jobs. No one loves babysitting deployments. No one loves waiting for their tests to run. So let's take care of those intelligently using a massive amount of machine learning, a tiny bit of AI, to actually do what our best engineers have to sit there and do and don't want to. So really, that's what we're here to help with.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think we should start today's conversation kind of looking back at the last 18 months. And, it's been a horrible 18 months. I don't think anybody can deny that, regardless of what part of the world that you look at. But, the pandemic has done something that would have happened anyhow, and it pushed us into the future. Right? It made organizations perhaps rethink their operating models, to certainly be able to rethink perhaps how they're structured. And again, it would have happened anyhow, but crisis accelerates change. And I think many organizations that maybe were slower to move to, say, the cloud, or to really start to think about time and quality, as Deepti said, are now putting that in center stage. So, at the highest level, let's not assume that every organization has mastered CICD, or maybe some are just really in their early stages. What's your advice, particularly those that are looking at either on-prem to cloud, or maybe they're going to look at a hybrid environment? There used to be a misbelief that you couldn't do CICD on-prem. I think that's been proven wrong. So again, Nick, I'm going to go back to you. What do you think? Like, if I'm a CIO, and I've been I don't call them legacies, I call them heritage organizations, right? So I'm a heritage organization. We've been operating the same way. We have a really blended environment of mainframe and on-prem, and maybe a little bit of cloud. What do I need to do to get started with CI/CD, particularly the CD part of it?
Sure, I think, and that's important. You mentioned CI and CD, but you said particularly CD, and we've lumped these together for a very long period of time, and I think they're actually very different. CI is about getting code to artifact, and continuous delivery is about taking the artifact all the way through, not just to production, but actually to our customers and making sure it's good. And what's interesting is I think everyone, regardless of whether we're heritage, in our software, or if we're modern, we all start with velocity, and we try to go fast, and we extend our CI tools, or we use open source tools, and then we very quickly find that all of that has to be governed. There's traditionally governing bodies that require us to do this in a purposeful way, and that's when it becomes hard. And if you can achieve both of those, speed, right, so velocity, as well as governance, the next problem people have is actually quality. And if you think about it, if you're deploying n times n faster, there's just not enough people in your NOC looking at all of the metrics to understand what broke what. And so it's a journey for everybody. And really it's picking something and a tool set that can offer you where you were, call it your mainframes, where you are, maybe your VMs and your, say your Pivotal, and where you're going, and your cloud native and your, say, Kubernetes. If you don't have something that supports it all, it becomes very challenging to have a ton of different subsets.
Yeah. And Eric, Nick referred to the NOC. I ran a NOC for several years. And so, again, watching what works, but also watching what breaks, right? So how do I feel comfortable, in a faster, more rapid deployment cycle, but I still have to have some. So is it either command control or the Wild West, right? So I think organizations feel that it's really somewhere in between the two. And that's not true. We know it's not true. It's been proven not to be true. But you still have governance, you still have risk, you still may have compliance. So Eric, how do you manage to that? Particularly when you have to be able to also look at, if we're going to go fast, how much more breaks?
Right, and you're talking about moving fast and much more breaks, and I that's one of the things we typically bring up when we're talking, and I like to say it's not necessarily more breaks, it's just things break faster, right? Because you're moving faster. But as you're moving and trying to manage those things, that's right. As far as Nick was saying too, you're building. I was just thinking this complexity that's growing, right? As people are migrating, they're moving to digital, they're trying to implement new technologies, especially moving to cloud, right? That opens up more opportunities. Like, you see, there's things that you can do in the cloud that trying to do on-prem can be prohibitive. Either you just don't have the expertise to do it, and you have to hire to do it, or you don't have the resources to do it. And moving to cloud can alleviate those things. So, but the complexity grows, right? But as Nick was saying, is pulling those things together and having a way to manage across that and try to bring that complexity down, right? Because you could be going across different tools. We talked about Kubernetes, VMs, containers and microservices, things start to grow. And if we can, especially in that deployment, those things, we're at that continuous deployment stage. Those things can make it better, but you build in that complexity. So trying to bring the tools together that can bring that complexity down and tie that whole process together, right? From CI, we talked about, and we're focused on CD at the point, but I mean, just across that CI and CD and keeping track of that release management and those types of things. And we're talking about traditional, we brought up traditional kind of organizations, and I can say I came from that, where we were in this stage and moving from this kind of traditional phase in more modern. And one is I would like to say is don't feel like I always felt like we were behind the game. Don't ever feel like that way, because there's, now I see all these customers and they're across the board, right? There's the spectrum as we talked about, right? But moving, right? Just as you're moving into these technologies, and this complexity grows, is just looking at the tools you're using that you currently have, building a strategy on how you're going to move, and are the tools that you currently use, are they going to meet those goals that you have and the strategy that you have? And if not, looking for that, right? But I would say looking for tools that can pull these things together, that are flexible, can grow with your strategy and grow with your goals and environment as you move.
Yeah, and it's not a magic wand. We talk about
No.
moving to the cloud, right? It's like, oh, move to the cloud. Like, yeah, today I'm on-prem and I'll wave the on, and suddenly we're in the cloud. And there's a whole different set of metrics. There's a whole different set of tools. There's a whole different set of skills that are associated with it. Deepti, you talked about time and quality, right? And it shouldn't be, is it time or quality? It has to be time and quality. And so the metrics change, right? The metrics change. What's your experience in terms of how do you balance? How does an organization start to balance it? We know we need to go faster, like that 18-month deployment cycle, may have worked in the past. It's not going to work anymore, right? And so now we're doing N times per day, but we also need to meet or exceed the quality. What do you think about that? I know you wanted to talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah. So I'll give an analogy here first. It's like when you're continuously deploying, analogy can be like you're going to gym and building your muscle. I mean, you start getting better at it. The more you do, the more better you are. It's very similar to continuous deployments. When we think of continuous deployments, if you're doing it every day or every week or every 2 weeks, even your quality will be better, actually. And I'll talk about the gates and all in a bit. But really, why I feel the quality will be better is because if you're releasing 6 months, you can have more quality issues or broken functionalities. But now you're releasing like a monolith. So the customers will have more issues, actually, than if you're deploying it very continuously. And to do that, of course, apart from basically time to market, in terms of quality, at least in our case, what we did was we do have a lot of quality gates. And there are many tools which really help out as part of the CICD. SonarQube is a good example. Many other test tools we are using, like Eggplant, and I can talk about that. But really, the point here is every place you should have a gate. And gate doesn't mean it's all automated. So it doesn't mean that it's going to take a lot of time, but you're trying to stage it out starting from the very beginning when a developer is checking in the code or a PR is going. You literally have a gate in terms of, okay, the unit tests are there. Did the code inspection automatically happen? So literally the bug which could have come at the system QA level, you're trying to prevent it at the very beginning. And I think that's where the continuous testing, whenever we talk about CI/CD, it's implicit that CT is so implicit, But I think that's the biggest DNA or the most important piece of the CI/CD, because business results cannot be just time to market until and unless we have customer satisfaction. I mean, they'll say, don't give me this until and unless, I mean, I'm not your tester. Literally, they'll say, some of the customers literally say, don't consider us as QA department for your company. So I think that will be what I'll definitely put out as one of the points.
Yeah, Eric, Nick, I'm really interested in your perspective on testing, because, all this talk at DevOps about shift left. I think the one thing that we wanted to and needed to shift left was testing, right? And all different levels of testing, including security, right? So who wants to jump in on testing?
I just want to make a quick comment on that too. I mean, as far as kind of the business case around it too, is the earlier you catch something, right, the cheaper it is to fix. If it makes it to production, it's going to cost you a lot more to fix that problem, right? I mean, it's affecting customers at that point. You may be affecting SLAs or agreements with them, right? But if you can catch it in the beginning, much cheaper, right? So I just wanted to make that point. Of Nick.
Yeah.
No, I think you're exactly right. I think what's important here is that when we think about people, process technology, or people, process tools, I think it's kind of all bogus. I think it's all about confidence. Right? If you have confidence in your people that they can deploy without doing inappropriate things, or that you have the measures in place, you'll let them deploy all the time. And it's all about confidence. And to your point, what allows you to do that is the security checks, is the quality checks, the tests. And if we do them appropriately and we give them a way to get from, literally code all the way through to production with all of the checks and the tests and the measures in place, that's exactly it. And that's ultimately what I think every company wants to achieve. And if you can do that, that's where you truly achieve velocity. But again, that's the hard part, because now it's all the governing pieces and all the checks and all the pieces. So it's not just about grabbing an open source technology. It's not just about extending your CI tool, but it's making sure that all those tests, all those measures are not only executed, but validated every single time, right? And then taking action on that. So just because you didn't pass it, that's not enough. What do we do if it doesn't pass? Do we kill the build? Do we abort do we roll back? Do we call people? And being able to take action on failures is equally important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And it kind of leads to the next question that I wanted to talk about, because I think you've all alluded to it in terms of governance, right? So I come from the ITIL space for many, many years, where organizations spend lots of time standing up change. They were supposed to be change advisory boards. Somehow they became change approval boards. And the crossroads between DevOps, SRE, confidence, self-organizing teams, and change management has been a really, really big challenge for organizations, because I don't know that they don't have the confidence in the people or the processes or the automation, but there is, as I said, a command and control feel that feels like you're governing, or that you're meeting your compliance, right? That the internal audits will pass, because somehow you put in a request for change 2 weeks ahead of time, every single change, and you're all laughing, but we've all kind of lived this, right? And I was an advocate for it 15 years ago. But 15 years ago is not today, right? Because again, we've matured from that. So how do we go from that? How do we go from this people making decisions about changes and the inherent delays to what Nick was describing as confidence? I mean, one of the things I love about Agile, SRE, and DevOps is they do promote self-organizing teams, right? The idea of an error budget in SRE, the ability to trust but verify, and then also to have processes in place that if it doesn't pass, that we're willing to either roll back or whatever. How do we get past that? Because I think large organizations in particular are really battling the change management battle. So Nick, I'm going to come back to you for just a minute, because you talked about confidence.
Sure. Actually, this is one of the things that a lot of our customers deal with specifically. And, I came from the critical infrastructure for the United States, so we had to deal with this every single time we deploy. People who didn't know anything about what we were deploying were approving our changes into production, and apparently that was good. And the reality has become, when you get to deploying as fast as we want, as we talked about, now you can't approve every single change, because there's just too many. There's not enough. And so what we've seen success in is now changing what gets approved. If you're approving that pipeline that gives you all those checks, measures, security, the tests, all the gates that you need, now that group should only be approving changes to that pipeline, adding a new test, adding a new scan, putting a different barrier in. And now we can guarantee that from code commit all the way to production, we can get there. And the only thing we're ever changing is not approving the actual deployments themselves, but approving how those deployments get to production. And that's honestly the goal, I think, of every organization. It just takes time. But the faster you deploy and the more they have to keep hitting approve, the faster they'll switch to that model.
And that's part of continuous deployment. I mean, that's scary for some organizations, the idea of continuous and deployment being in the same phrase, right? Deepti, what are you experiencing?
I'll say three things here. One is, it's important. I absolutely 100% concur with Nick. I'll add some more perspective to that, is also staging it out or segregating the deployment services. I think that also really helps, at least in our case study. I can say in my team's case study, we have seen once you start staging this up in terms of development clusters or testing clusters and kind of production clusters, you're still not really having a board who is really approving. You are still, there is a lot going on in terms of continuous work or and then putting it out as part of the staging process. I think that really helps in terms of not just the testing perspective, but also security, I'll say. So that I would like to add that part definitely as part of this. Other thing is, absolutely everywhere, the more we test, the more we have a push button, because it's, whenever we talk about continuous, it means it has to be a kind of a push button perspective. So in terms of that, the more you put your test cases, the more automation is there. 90% or 100%, if you could do that, will be the best. But the more you automate, I think that will be really the key things. But sometimes I think Nick was trying to bring that up, is that we put so many hundreds of test cases now that half of them are obsolete. It's not at all needed. Literally, it's a waste, and nobody has time to do that. I think that's another point, is how can we make sure that our obsolete cases, who are not fixing or bringing up any bugs, should be put out outside of the approach.
Yeah, and again, that's, I think, really interesting, because if you look at it from a compliance perspective, I would assume, and maybe it's a bad assumption, that we would be able to meet the regulatory or compliance requirements because we can prove that the right tests are being done at the right times, right? So that there are actually controls in place. But Eric, let's talk about this from a change management and incident management perspective, because I think there's a piece of it that we measure MTTR, right? And in MTTR, something had to break, right, in order for us to be able to manage MTTR, as opposed to like mean time between incidents or something like that. But change management, the whole original purpose of having a formal change management was to reduce the number of incidents, right? To be able to create incident workflows that were, so that when something changed, an incident occurred, we could answer what changed, or we could presumably, and I'm going to use presumably, have some Star Trek council that approved the changes, and somehow that was going to reduce our incident. How do we overcome that from an incident workflow perspective? How do we overcome that so that, again, let's look at regulatory requirements, but also a quality piece of it?
Right. So, you're talking about, you mentioned MTTR, right? And trying to lower those things. And that's what most people are trying to do, right? And if we're focused on this quality and our CI and CD process and these gates that we've been talking about, we focus on those things, and those are checking and making sure that we're meeting these criteria. Then again, going back to the confidence, we should have the confidence that what we're deploying is good, right? But then even moving in, as far as talking about confidence once you get into production, even having the confidence of one of us mentioned about rollbacks and things like that, right? If we're building an architecture and a deployment process, that one, if there is a problem, One, we could do roll back a deployment, or we could easily push out or quickly push out an update to fix that issue. Things. I mean, those architectural things, right? And around microservices and things like that can help with that, or containers, but also feature flagging, right? Just making it easy to roll things back. But then if you do experience an incident, right, is automating, how do you handle that in your environment? And I understand the change management piece of it and where it came from, and I've dealt with that in the past. And it all comes around again to that confidence, right? We're trying to lower that. We're trying to reduce the number of incidents. And I think that one of the things you see, especially when organizations start to move faster, is that they start to see more incidents and they get concerned. And it's not necessarily that they're having more incidents, it's because they're moving faster, so they're seeing them more quickly. And I brought that up in the beginning, right? And so the idea, the point is trying to reduce that when you do see those, reducing that. And that's where I think MTTR has become more popular in the past several years, is we want to reduce that amount. It's like the number of incidents, yeah, that's important, but we're not gonna focus on that. But when we do have an incident, how do we bring that down? And I think again that goes back into automation as well. And that's where I was talking about the XMatters platform, and we work on kind of that operational level of automation, where we're not trying to automate the CICD process. We're not necessarily automating your production environment. We're working on automating that process. It could be incident process. It could be your issue process, even in non-prod. Because I guess one of the other things I wanted to bring up too is, as we're moving faster, our non-production environments become very important, right? Because we're trying to move fast and we're having problems in our non-production environments, and we're taking, that issue, we're having issues, and that's taking us a long time. I mean, if we have a high MTTR in our non-production environment, that's affecting our overall process, right? And pushing, our speed and velocity, but also our ability to get value out to our customers.
So I want to go back, because you're all talking about confidence, and confidence is a human emotion, right? For me to have confidence in you, that's a part of my emotional makeup, right? It isn't something that you can automate per se. And so the question then becomes, the automation can help instill confidence, certainly, right? As Nick said, we can, check, you all referred to the gates, and you pass through the gates and all of that. But give me some practical advice. How do I improve my ability to feel confident in other teams, in other people, or even confidence in the automation and its ability to do what it does? From a human perspective, how do we increase confidence? And Nick, I'm going to go to you, because you're the one that brought up our word confidence, and I really want to be able to provide people that are listening some ideas in terms of, yeah, we all agree that confidence is a good thing, but how do you do that, right? How do you feel more confident in the people, the process, and the automation?
Sure. I'll actually go back to what both Eric and Deepthi said. And, Eric, you brought around the idea of MTTR. And if you have tooling that can understand what you deployed on which infrastructure, with which configuration, and which secrets, it can always get you back to where you were before you started without you writing code. Guess what? You're not worried about a failure, because it's handled. And you see it happen, even if you made a mistake and it gets it back for you. Now that gives you confidence to not have to worry about it. That MTTR used to be 30 minutes, now it's 30 seconds. If you look at, Deepthi, when we talk about even all these obsolete tests,
yeah,
you want confidence? How about AI and ML that can go look at your code and be like, why am I running these tests? I shouldn't be running them. We will skip them, because there's no reason in any way, shape, or form. Like if I changed the gas cap in your car, you wouldn't expect me to go check every electrical switch and every mechanical system. That'd be asinine, but we do that today in our testing. So again, if the tooling now starts doing the things like our best humans have to, and it's the worst part, the part they hate, now you start getting confidence in it, right? And if you have confidence in the tool, right, you'll have confidence in the process that it pushes. And now even in your own ability, because I can't make a mistake. My teams beside me can't make a mistake. And if they do, it's okay because we've got processes in place to actually handle it. That's what allows you to start deploying fast. And I mean rapidly.
Yeah. Jane, I would like to add one more point to that is I think two other things which we can add is one is metrics. If we could really see kind of live dashboard, I'm talking about like exactly like you said, that you are sitting at a level and you want to know what's happening. I'm not the one who is working on it, but I really want to know. So those dashboards, and tools are available, these kind of dashboards are available, but I think which shows out like a double click, starting from the top till going to the last level. I think that also really helps confidence, not just in the development team, but the ones who are literally signing the check. They feel also confident. I think that's where that is another add, I'll say.
I think that's a really great point. If we make it visible, then confidence grows. Eric, anything you want to add to our confidence conversation?
That's exactly what I was going to say is in my experience that, confidence in the team that's building it is one thing, but then conveying that confidence to, the people that have to sign, that are signing off, and maybe that's virtually, but the people that would have signed off in a change in your change review or whatever, right? Now it's like they have this confidence, and if they wanted to go see the results or what these tests were and what the results were, it's there, and they have the confidence and the knowledge that it's there. But if you can build that confidence, and maybe they go look at these things to verify that, okay, yeah, all these tests pass, and we see what you do. But they start to build that confidence in the team that they're building these tests, the gates and things that are happening. And those things are happening beforehand. So they have that confidence, and they know the information is there that they can go look at, right? If they need to.
Now, I love the word confidence. That we use the word trust a lot, but I really like confidence. I think it's a very powerful word. We do have some questions from our audience today, so let's take a look at those. So Israel has asked, in a top-down leadership org that talks DevOps, but inertia keeps us from implementing automation, which are typically the easier or more impactful components to CICD. A bottom-up effort can prioritize to inspire leadership to truly prioritize. I'm not sure what the question is, but I guess I'm going to interpret it. Nick, what do you think? I saw you gave me the hand.
Well, I did, because actually this is exactly what what everybody was just speaking about. If you don't measure it, you don't know where to start. And this is one of the biggest things. Without the measurement and understanding where those bottlenecks are, picking it would be just at random, and here, where do we start? Understanding the highest impact, what can bring down those times, and oftentimes, right, it's testing. Oftentimes it's manual processes that are taking the longest pole in the tent. But understanding where they are, without that measurement, you'll never know where to start. So I think at first you have to start measuring it, like we said. So this would be to get you to those dashboards, but start measuring it. Then you can actually start figuring out where we can make the most impact and pick those low-hanging fruit. Don't boil the ocean. Don't go, hey, we're going to go CICD tomorrow and we're going to push to an entirely new cloud with all new things. Pick the lowest hanging fruit. Start there.
I love that.
Yeah.
Deepti, go ahead.
One more point is because Israel talked about top-down leadership. So really, in terms of executives, I'll really say, because we are so technical people in the room, always we talk about CICD. But when it comes to executives, they're really interested in revenue, business impact. And so talking the same language and kind of getting a buy-in from them really helps a lot in terms of when we're talking about CD, what does it really mean? It means recurring renewals. It means subscriptions. It means kind of recurring revenue, which is coming up. Somehow using the language, it's more like know your audience. So when you are trying to bring this up to the top leadership and getting their buy-in in terms of exactly like Israel is saying, how do we get that automation? We want that automation, but how do we get the time? I think showing that with respect to the exact big picture, which is how this is going to impact our subscriptions or renewals, I think it will be easy then win in terms of getting staffing or resources on the same.
Yeah, and Eric, let me kind of feed you part of this question, because I think there's a key aspect of it. Top-down leadership wants DevOps, but there's a certain amount of inertia about implementing automation, right? So we know we want it, right? We're not necessarily either resourcing it, or there's I don't know what it is. There's I love the word inertia, where we want it, but we're not yet starting to drive the automation aspect of it. So Eric, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I was going to say, I kind of read, maybe I've interpreted it incorrectly, but more of maybe there is the desire, but this inertia of movement, right? Where the business is moving and we don't want to take away from that inertia to go implement this automation and things that we need, or, but I think part of it, I would say, going back and like PP was talking about, is going to this up to management and things, and showing these things is one. Also, Nick's talking about finding the lowest hanging fruit, looking at your process and what can we look at, and how, if we automated that, how could that improve? And then taking that, and also how can we associate that to a dollar amount, right? Like if we can, if that's reducing, someone's time doing a manual task that they could be spending, developers doing this manual task, or they're, we have people running all these manual tests, and we can automate that and they can focus on new automated tests. How much time are we saving? Focus on new value, right? Developers, QA, but then even moving, as we lower that time or reduce that time to production and value to the customer. And that goes to that, reoccurring revenue and things. Like customers want to see, they want to see new value. Like we're paying for it. What I bought, last year, okay, I paid for it, but I'm expecting some new value over time, right? And if that's taking, if I'm slow to that, so as far as there's the time aspect, but then also the cost aspect, time, but associating that to cost, right? Cost and revenue, and how we can improve that over time, and that it's not a, like Nick said, it's not a, we're going to go from here to, light speed. We're going to start, right. We're going to start here and slowly move, and so how we can move that along. But I see that inertia as, when I interpreted it, was kind of that inertia of the business. And I've seen that where everybody has all these grand plans, but if no one ever, setting what the goal is, looking at what it is we can change and how we can change that, setting a strategy of how we're going to do that over time, right? Because I think if you set these lofty goals, you're never going to reach it.
I have one quick one, if that's okay.
Yeah,
and it's really, I think, when you look at automation and you look at continuous integration, you look at continuous delivery, the whole software delivery cycle, if you use it as a stick, it will never work. It has to be a carrot. And this is why I said, if you create that place where you gain confidence, not only in your people, they gain confidence in the tooling that you have and the processes that you've set up, it will actually be a carrot. And we ask every one of our VPs that buys our tool, do you use Harness as a carrot or a stick? And the best answer was from Choice Hotels, where they said, for 80% of our business, we use it as a carrot. And for 20% of the business, we had to use it as a large carrot-shaped stick. That was pretty fun. But it should be a carrot. And if it's a carrot, it'll grow internally.
Yeah, I agree. And again, just kind of looking at this space, completely top-down approach or completely bottom-up approach doesn't really work, right? There has to be kind of a meeting in the middle. And, to everybody's point, this is a journey. And it starts with baby steps. One of the key DevOps principles that I love is experimentation. Now, you're not going to experiment on your most business critical application, right? But but the bottom-up approach says you can experiment. You can really start to figure out where you have confidence and where you don't. So yeah, you can't mandate CICD or you can't mandate DevOps, and also if you try to grow it up from the bottom, unfortunately, you may not get the resourcing that you need. So it's somewhere in the middle that, some people operate on proof of concept, some people operate on leap of faith, right? And you got to figure out who's who. So there's that. Okay, a couple of other questions. Thank you for that, by the way. Another question from the audience is one I'm always very excited about. Any specific skills or traits to look for when hiring a self-organizing DevOps person? And I'll even spin that a little bit further. What skills, right? If I'm a DevOps professional or I aspire to be a DevOps professional, what skills should I be looking at? Who wants to take that one first?
I can go first, ladies first.
Okay.
So I'll look forward first is the skills. I'll talk about the soft skills later, but first is the technical skills. I'll say majorly if I was looking to hire someone, there will be three major technical skills. Definitely, I like to look into is one is infrastructure. I mean, if the person has, if you're talking about an experienced resource, and if you're talking about recent graduates, I'll talk about that. But really, in terms of experienced resources, really how the person has worked on the infrastructure side, whether AWS, Azure, or other platforms. Automation. Automation is Ansible, Jenkins or the tools, what kind of tools they have used out, I think, if you're a Jenkins users and how you have kind of automated. And then is and you may not get all the three skills, by the way, in one person. I just want to make sure that will be God. but virtualization is the third one, where, okay, how it has a person worked on Kubernetes or Docker or VMware or kind of app volumes is a new thing which is coming up. So those will be really, if somebody has worked on one of the skill, I mean, it will be a complementary team then which can help out. But those are more on the technical skills. But the most important is the attitude, of course. Problem solving, how you are kind of working as a problem solver. I really look forward for that as really the primary thing, because you can teach or kind of coach somebody, or train somebody to acquire those skills. But what is your attitude? I think that really matters everywhere.
That's awesome. DevOps Institute does an annual upskilling report, and at the end of this, I'm going to plead for people to fill out the 22 survey. But you're right. It is a combination of human skills, and we don't call them soft anymore because they're hard, right? So like we don't call them legacy, we call them heritage. But it is a combination of having the right attitude, being a good collaborator, having good empathy, and really deep, now the term is full stack technical skills, and that makes it. Eric, what do you think? What kind of skills should somebody or an organization be investing in?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, like DP was saying, I mean, technical skills are very important. I mean, you know what you're building and you know what skills you need around that. But I think if you're moving more to this DevOps, Agile type organization, that you have, it's around attitude. Like she was saying, you have this attitude of, I want to solve a problem, and that excites me. And I'm not afraid to learn. I'm not afraid to learn new things, because I mean, technology is changing at, speed right now, right? And so if you're not willing to learn and you're just stuck in kind of where, if you don't see this attitude of, I'm here to solve a problem, I'm here to learn whatever I need to learn to move along, right? I mean, even as a developer, even in hard skills, development, I mean, I've seen it where, someone's hired in with specific hard skills, development skills, right? Certain languages and things, and then as the solution expands, we decide to make changes to our architecture with things that we want, technologies that we use that require developers to either be flexible and take the knowledge they have and apply that somewhere new and learn something new, or you're just going to be left behind, right? And it doesn't work. So I think technical skills are obviously very important, but I think those soft skills of willingness to learn and willingness there and this excitement to solve problems.
Yeah, it's a great day to be in IT. Nick, what do you think?
I think everything that you guys have said is exactly right. One of the things that I find extremely important when we hire folks in the DevOps area, and I know we call it DevOps, but you also notice we talked a lot about operational pieces with this, and it tends to be that side. And so what I look for people is that can actually empower developers, that can empower their teammates. And I look at it as a leadership skill. So when we really want to look at someone who can help in that self-organizing DevOps person, it's someone who has that leadership ability to empower everyone else. If they're the one that can only do it, and they hold their fiefdom, which a lot of them do, that will not scale with the organization, and it will not empower people. And so I find the most important thing is finding someone who can actually empower the rest of my developers.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because I think self-organization requires a team of leaders who lead each other, right? Who lead each other, who, cross-pollinate, who understand shared accountabilities, who can set metrics for their team or their product or their organization. But you're absolutely right. Fiefdoms, people that want to be, if you've ever read the Phoenix Project, right, Brent, where I have all the knowledge and I have to be involved in everything and I have to, that's not sustainable in the long run, because organizations can't thrive on that. We have another question that I think relates to this. Michael's asking, what are the main challenges you see with implementation with new Agile teams? Deepti, I'm going to go to you first on that. What are the challenges, particularly with the Agile teams? Because, again, we're really mostly talking about developers, right?
Yeah. So the biggest challenge, and Michael said new Agile team, so I'll try to put that out more. Emphasis on the new part is, you are trying to implement a new process, a new change management process here, and you have to keep the lights still up and running. So you have hundreds of customers you are dealing with, and you are still trying to implement a new process. I think the biggest challenge is, how do you keep the lights on and still staff? You will not have an army of resources. It's the same people. How will you still keep the regular business but implement a new change? I think that's the one big challenge, at least I have seen, is how do you do that? The second one is just change. I mean, everybody wants change, but who wants to do it, is nobody will put the hand up, is you will still get a lot of reluctance there. So just for that, I'll say use the same Dr. Cotter's 8-step change management process. Sometimes you have to create an urgency and, of course, show the customer view. So those are really the two big ones, I'll say, I have seen at least every time when we go for a new process change, is how to do that.
Everybody says they want to change, but you go first. Please. Right. Eric, what do you think? How do you bring this to new Agile teams?
Yeah, so I was kind of thinking in two aspects. One is more of, I guess, the feelings of the team. So you have the team, right? Your development team, you're there. And I would say I've been in this before, and you get a lot of the times because you're building these metrics and things that you can measure and understand, and the team starts to feel like, especially moving to Agile, that you're just trying to sit over their shoulder and make sure they're doing their job well, or measuring, like, how well they lose. Trying to think of the word. Confidence keeps coming in my head for some reason, but they take it as a negative, where and we have to make sure, especially as leaders in these organizations, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to help the team be better, right? We measure these things so that we can look back and see, okay, well, we didn't do so well here. No one's to blame for that, but we need to move. But how can we improve, right, as a team? The other aspect too is kind of more to the management part, and I've had this discussion in the past before too. When you're moving to Agile, and especially in this case, we were moving from more of a waterfall type development process, right? And you're in these like project managers, program managers, and they're like, well, I need to know what's going to happen, what's going to be available, 3 months, 6 months, a year from now? And my question is when we're doing it with this waterfall methodology, and we give you all of these gates that we're going to meet, how often does that ever happen? And it's like, that never happens. Usually you try to plan that far out. Yeah, we want to plan, but trying to plan out these things in detail that far ahead, you start to run into things like, requirements get dropped or the timeline gets pushed out, things like that, right? So you never do that. And when you're moving to Agile, the whole idea is that we're catching these things ahead of time, right? So this is kind of like building that confidence in the leadership from the development process, is that, we're going to run into these problems, but in an Agile process, the whole idea is trying to bring those things up earlier so we can take care of them sooner, right? Before we get down 6 months down the road or 8 months down the road. And then it's like, oh, we're not going to make this timeline. What are we going to do? And, requirements start to get dropped. So we make those decisions farther ahead, right? So, what we know here, what's most important to move on? Do we just drop this and this is more important and we need to move on to something else? Whatever that is, but we're finding it sooner than waiting. So I think I see it as two aspects, right? The team, kind of your development team, and then your kind of leadership, right?
Cool. So Nick, I'm gonna shape it a little differently and put it back into our perspective of CICD. Traditionally, Agile teams committed their code, but then the rest of it happened somewhere else, right? So it went downstream, it left the Agile teams, I can't see it, it goes into production at some point. So how do we bring the CD part of CICD, right, into the Agile teams where, again, depending on where you are in the journey, you might have gotten so far with CI, and we know they're not the same thing, right? But you might have gotten so far with CI. Now you got to get these Agile teams thinking about CD, both from a delivery and a continuous deployment and a continuous testing perspective. How do we change that and have them look at CI/CD as something that they're a part of?
Sure. I think when you look at teams as a whole, if we build them appropriately, we have individuals. Again, they can empower each other throughout this process. And what my suggestion is, lean on the strengths. Right? If we have people that are phenomenal at getting code to artifact, having them manage infrastructure, networking, and cloud doesn't seem like a great use of their time and or resources. Vice versa, if you have someone who's massively understood in infrastructure and in networking, having them work with repos and developing code also maybe not the best suited. And what I find specifically in this Agile piece, I want to make sure, and I'll leave it as a word of caution for new teams. Moving from, say, waterfall to Agile is phenomenal, but we have to keep the end in mind. And there's a trap that people get, they get trapped in, they get caught, which is they start working only on the urgent and important, and they forget about the long-term important goals. And if we do that, Agile can become a whirlwind where we get stuck only working on what's currently the problem right now. And so I would state for new Agile teams, make sure we also focus on the end goal so that we know we're spending the time on what's important and not maybe urgent, but also leave time for the urgent and important.
Do you think that's the origins of full stack developers? Like, this whole concept of full stack, you write it, you build it, you test it, you secure it, you deploy it, and you operate it. Do you think that's part of it? I mean, do you think that maybe some of the challenges are, whoa, that's a lot of stuff to put on a developer? So Nick, I'm going to come back to you for just a minute because I just wanted to kind of feed on what you were saying.
Yeah, I think we've done a disservice by expecting everyone to do everything. And I think the shift left should be empowering those people, making sure that they have the tooling, they have the processes, they have the things that they need to get code out, but not necessarily rolling all the responsibility underneath of them. And I think that's important, giving them visibility, even to cost. Hey, if I'm going to deploy new things, what's it going to cost? That's something people haven't had. These are the important pieces that we need to empower people with, not necessarily give them the responsibility.
Yeah, I always say I don't like the term full stack. I'm one of the few that doesn't, because what if you're not full stack, you're half stack, right? Quarter stack, right? Like, I don't know, it feels that way. Okay, we're going to run out of time. So what I'd like to do is just take the last few minutes and have each of you share, what do you think your one really practical piece of advice would be for an organization? Let's not talk about CI for a minute. Let's really look at CD, because I think that's where, the rubber meets the road. What would be your one piece of advice for an organization that's really moving into CD? So Deepti, I'm going to come to you first.
Okay, so I'll say there will be 4 major areas where I like the team to definitely think about as my lessons learned. First is you always need to keep the centerpiece as customer success. I think that's very, very important. We go so much into our local minima that we forget what was the big problem we were trying to solve. So it's very important to keep the customer as the focal point, or customer success as the focal point. Second will be, again, I'm a big follower of metrics and measurements. So even if you are kind of implementing the whole the CD piece, make sure you're trying to get what is the business value, the quality metrics, or what is the after state? What is the end? Keep the end in mind when you even begin the project. So it's very important that you keep the measurements after state in mind as you start kind of putting up the deployment process into the mind. Second is, I'll go back to Israel here, is leadership and commitment. These kind of things, we really need executive buy-in. But that doesn't mean, my third point is, it's still a shared responsibility. It's not a tops down. Don't think that it's everybody needs to think this is my project. That's the third part. And fourth is, of course, automation. Process automation that accelerates delivery. If we are thinking everybody is going to have this, you need to have these 4 major points and keep customer focus as your centerpiece.
Thank you for that. Eric, what about you? Practical advice.
So I would totally agree with those things. But yeah, if moving with CD, especially these heritage, we're talking about heritage organizations, right? Is just thinking about, one is, what are these processes that we spend time on and that we can remove, right? And then it goes into that confidence piece again, right? How can we provide, and we talked about the metrics and things that we can measure. If we can build good metrics, right, that we can provide and build confidence in these processes that were in these kind of legacy processes that were there to build confidence, right? If we can measure these things before, in our automated, we automate these things and measure them, and we have that information available to build the confidence for the leadership and the team. I think it's going to speed that process up, right? Yeah. So sorry, I kind of lost track there, but yeah.
That's okay. That's all right. Nick, what kind of practical advice? I know you've talked about starting small and keeping going. What else? What other advice you have?
I'll be honest. Deepti covered this 100% perfect, and I'm going to repeat it because it was amazing, right? Customer success in mind, right? Making sure you have metrics and measurements, shared responsibility, automation. And I think one of the key things, and you said it very quickly, but I think it's extremely important, the end in mind. If we're planning for only where we're going, that's not even good enough. We have to plan for where we were, where we are, and where we're going. And our decisions and our thoughts and our tooling and our processes need to be around that entirety. You take each step small and you take those pieces small, but have that end in mind to make sure you can be in that operating cadence with what you have now as well as where you're going. But honestly, genuinely, I could not have said it better. That's why I mirrored your comments. So phenomenal job there.
Thank you. Phenomenal job by all of you. And thank you so much for sharing your insight, your experience, your thought leadership. I hope the people that were listening today came away with some practical advice on CICD. SKILup webinars will continue month over month, so I hope you'll come back and join us. I am going to, as I promised, make a plea to those that are listening. DevOps Institute runs an annual report known as the Upskilling IT Report. This is our 4th year doing it. We reach out into the community. We get thousands of people to tell us which skills are considered must-have, nice to have, and not as important across multiple domains. The survey's open. Please take a few minutes and fill it out. You're welcome to go download the 21 report. It's very deep data for the humans at DevOps. At the same time, again, DevOps Institute has multiple levels of membership, including free. So I invite you to do that as well. Deep T, Eric, Nick, really, thank you so much. I learn as much from these panels as everyone else. And if I come away with one word to sum it up, Nick, you called it. It's confidence, right? We have to have confidence in CICD. We have to have confidence in our people. And we certainly have to have confidence in our process. I wish everyone well, and we'll see you soon on the next SKILup webinar. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, real quick, just as a reminder, I want to let everybody know this session has been recorded. For anyone who has purchased the program or would like to view it again, keep an eye out for instructions on your inbox on how to view the recording. You can also go to the DevOps Institute website. For today's Amazon gift card winners, we have Tanya H., Sim B., Reed H., and Michelle C. Congratulations to the Amazon gift card winners. We'll be sending you instructions to claim your gift card. So keep an eye out on your inbox, also your spam folder. Again, thank you for joining today's program for the DevOps Institute SKILup webinars, CICD. Have a great day, and you may now disconnect.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.